Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 39th discussion of our Read, Write, Inspire Classics book club. So today we are discussing Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. We'll see a bit about the author because a lot of his fiction is a reflection of his life. And we'll also especially see about Heart of Darkness, critical reception of the book, themes, and our favorite quotes from it. So Joseph Conrad is a Polish British novelist. He was one of the greatest writers in the English language, and although he did not speak English fluently until his 20s, he became a master prose stylist. And as you read the book, you must have realized the way he, crafts his sentences is very interesting at many places. So he wrote many novels and short stories, mainly in nautical settings, and they usually depict crises of human individuality in the midst of what he saw as a very indifferent, inscrutable, and amoral world. He influenced numerous authors. Many dramatic films have been adapted from and inspired by his works. Numerous writers and critics have commented that his fictional works, written largely in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, seem to have anticipated the later world events. So, Conrad was born on 3rd December 1857 in Ukraine, in a small town in Ukraine. And that his town was basically a part of the Russian Empire. However, it had once belonged to Poland. And he was the only child of Apollo, who was a writer, translator, political activist, and he would also later on become a revolutionary. So Apollo had, basically in Conrad's town itself, Polish literature was held in very high esteem. And especially there was a lot of patriotic Polish literature. Poland had been divided among Prussia, Austria, and Russia in 1795. And Joseph Conrad's family had played a very significant role in the Polish attempts to regain independence. So Conrad had he came from a family where there was fierce opposition to uh, taking over of the country, basically. Just a second, please. Yeah. Okay. I think my sharing has stopped. Sorry, I'll share. Did I share my screen till now? No. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay. So sorry. I'll just start. Okay. Hi, Percy. Okay, so I'll just show you the slides which you missed. I'm so sorry, I forgot to turn on the screen share. As I said, this was the 39th book club discussion, and these were the topics. So we just started talking about the author. Yeah, so Conrad's father was, fiercely patriotic father, Apollo. He belonged actually to the red political faction. He was basically had more of communist views. So his main goal was to re-establish the pre-partition boundaries of Poland, which also advocated land reform and the abolition of serfdom. However, later on, Joseph refused to join and follow in Apollo's footsteps, and his choice of exile over resistance was a source of lifelong guilt for Conrad. Apollo did his best to teach Conrad at home whenever as a child, and he introduced him in a very early age to Victor Hugo, Shakespeare, and to Polish romantic poetry. Uh, Conrad had a very long maritime career, and most of his stories are influenced by the journals which he kept during his voyages in the sea. So in 1894, when Conrad was aged 36, he reluctantly gave up the sea, partly because of poor health and partly also due to the unavailability of ships. He had become so fascinated with writing and he had decided that he would take on a literary career. Financial success long eluded Conrad, who often requested advances from magazines and book publishers and loans from acquaintances. John Galsworthy was one of his close acquaintances. And eventually, a government grant of £100 per annum was awarded to him in 1910. And that somehow, kept him going for a very long time. And his success slowly came to him by about in 1913 when Chance, a novel called Chance, was published. Though later on, the novel did not have that much of reception among people. He had many critics in Britain, and he was always, felt a lack of support in his country. However, he found much sympathetic readership, especially in the United States. And later on, the authors who came after, Conrad's time were much more influenced by him. In fact, Scott Fitzgerald's, when he was writing to Mencken, he complained that about having been omitted from a list of Conrad imitators. And after that, there have been dozens of American writers who have acknowledged their debt to Conrad, including William Faulkner, William Burroughs, Saul Bellow, Philip Roth, and many more. So about Conrad's writing, there's this very interesting famous passage by T.E. Lawrence, who was a army general and a writer himself. So he says, Conrad's absolutely the most haunting thing in prose that ever was. I wish I knew how every paragraph he writes, they are all paragraphs. He seldom writes a single sentence. So how every paragraph he writes goes on sounding in waves, like the note of a tenor bell after it stops. It's not built in the rhythm of ordinary prose, but on something existing only in his head. And as he can never say what it is he wants to say, all his things end in a kind of hunger, a suggestion of something he can't say or do or think. So his books always look bigger than they are. He's as much a giant of the subjective as Kipling is of the objective. Do they hate one another? So, coming to the book, The Heart of Darkness. So, the novella is widely regarded as a critic of European colonial rule in Africa, while also examining the themes of power dynamics and morality. The genre of Heart of Darkness is basically quest literature. Quest literature is when a hero goes through various challenges and finally reaches a point where he either understands the meaning of life or the meaning of the world surrounding him. So, although Conrad does not name the river on which most of the narrative takes place at the time of writing, the Congo Free State, the location of the large and economically important Congo River, was a private colony of Belgium's King Leopold II. So, central to Conrad's work is the idea that there is little difference between civilized people and savages. So, Heart of Darkness implicitly comments on imperialism and racism. So, the novella's setting provides the frame for Marlowe's story of his fascination for the prolific ivory trader Kurtz. So, basically, there is this ivory trader Kurtz who's, managed to send back so much ivory that there is a lot of fascination for who he is. And this fascination is what takes Marlowe across the river to go and meet him. And the whole journey is where Conrad draws parallels between London, which he calls as the greatest town on earth, and Africa as a place of darkness. But later on, we come to see which is really light and which is really dark, is what is the story behind it. So originally, the story was issued as a 3-part serial story in Blackwood's magazine to celebrate the 1000th edition of the magazine, after which it has been widely republished and translated in many languages. It provided the inspiration for Francis Ford Coppola's 1979 film Apocalypse Now. And in 1998, the Modern Library ranked Heart of Darkness as 67th on their list of the 100 best novels in English of the 20th century. So, how did the novel actually begin? So, in 1890, at the age of 32, Conrad was appointed by a Belgian trading company to serve on one of its steamers. So, while sailing up the Congo River from one station to another, the captain became ill and Conrad assumed command. So, he guided the ship up the tributary.
Calculus affair. Did a calculus affair?
No.
Uh, Percy, can you please mute?
Yeah.
So, while sailing up the Congo River from one station to another, the captain became ill and Conrad assumed command. So, he guided the ship up the tributary Liolaba River to the trading company's innermost station in Eastern Congo Free State. So, Marlowe has very similar experiences to what exactly happened to Conrad. And when Conrad began to write the novella 8 years after returning from Africa, he drew all his inspiration from his travel journals. So he described Heart of Darkness as a wild story of a journalist who becomes manager of a station in the African interior and makes himself worshipped by a tribe of natives. So the novella was not a success during Conrad's life. Conrad himself did not consider it to be particularly notable. But by the 1960s, it was a standard assignment in many college and high school English courses. So literary critic Harold Bloom wrote that Heart of Darkness had been analyzed more than any other work of literature that is studied in universities and colleges, which he attributed to Conrad's unique propensity for ambiguity. So when I was just researching for for this presentation too, I came across, I'm not so sure how many research papers. Just if you just do a search on Google, you'll be completely blown away by the number of research papers on Heart of Darkness. So in King Leopold's Ghost, Adam Hochschild wrote that literary scholars have made too much of the psychological aspects of Heart of Darkness, while paying scant attention to Conrad's accurate recounting of the horror arising from the methods and effects of colonialism in the Congo Free State. So, yes, a lot of the history of whatever is mentioned, it has been the truth, but there's not been much of a highlight on what exactly is being told, is what was his, glows over there. So what is the critical reception which this book got was, this happened more towards the recent decades. So Heart of Darkness has been criticized in post-colonial studies, particularly by the Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe. So in his 1975 public lecture, An Image of Africa, Racism in Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Achebe described Conrad's novella as an offensive and deplorable book that dehumanized Africans. He argued that Conrad blinkered with xenophobia, and he incorrectly depicted Africa as the antithesis of Europe and civilization, ignoring the artistic accomplishments of the Fang people who lived in the Congo River Basin at the time of the book's publication. He argued that the book promoted and continues to promote a prejudiced image of Africa that depersonalizes a portion of the human race, and concluded that it should not be considered a great work of art. And on the other hand, Achebe's critics argue that he fails to distinguish Marlowe's view from Conrad's, which results in very clumsy interpretations of the novella. So in their view, Conrad portrays Africans sympathetically and their plight tragically, and refers sarcastically to and condemns outright the supposedly noble claims of European colonists, thereby demonstrating his skepticism about the moral superiority of European men. So ending a passage that describes the condition of chained, emancipated slaves, Marlowe remarks, after all, I also was a part of the great cause of these high and just proceedings. So some observers assert that Conrad, whose native country had been conquered by imperial powers, empathized by default with other subjugated peoples. But it's very easy to, misinterpret many of his sentences, is what I would say. And I think that's clear that Conrad does, turn out to be very ambiguous in many ways in which he writes. So Jeffrey Mayers notes that Conrad, like his acquaintance Roger Casement, was one of the first men to question the Western notion of progress. So it was a dominant idea in Europe from the Renaissance to the Great War. And he was the first person to attack the hypocritical justification of colonialism and to reveal the savage degradation of the white man in Africa. Likewise, there are many more people, who had opposed what was mentioned by Achebe and supported Conrad. For example, they said Heart of Darkness is a condemnation of colonial brutality and refer to the novel as the most powerful thing written on the subject. Conrad scholar Peter Fitzgerald says, nowhere in the novel does Conrad or any of his narrators, personified or otherwise, claim superiority on the part of Europeans.
Because, they will have all the support systems. And ek bande ka jo काम करेगा, someone like Hemant would have a very less.
Sorry. Please make sure you're on mute. Okay. Sorry, we'll just screen sharing is paused. Is my screen share paused? Yeah, let's resume. Okay.
I think it's okay.
Yeah, you can see now? Yeah. Fine. So, yeah. So he says nowhere does Conrad or any of his narrators, personified or otherwise, claim superiority on the part of Europeans on the grounds of alleged genetic or biological difference. So, personally, my opinion was that I didn't find anywhere it's mentioned on genetic or biological difference, but there was like this underlying current of superiority, which is there in the thoughts of the narrator of the story, is what I would say. Maybe that was not what was the intention. So
Can I add something here?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I think that he's not outwardly racist, but the dehumanization is sort of takes away the agency because then they become objects of pity. So it is racist in that sense, right? Because you're not really looking at them as humans, as people with agency, as people who have had a legitimate life and culture before the Europeans came in. You're looking at them as these poor victims, and the corruption of white man is still central. Which, it's a different view of colonialism when it comes to the white man, but it's not really. This book made me so angry. It's not really. It's really when you dehumanize a group of people, you're automatically treating them as less than human because they're just a mass of people with face paint, and you just get this like tribal, basic
cannibals, and he had all those mentions also.
Yeah, he doesn't give them. He calls them cannibals, and I'm sure they were not cannibals. Maybe there are cannibals that exist in that part of the world from that time. I don't know. But I think it feels like it's more of a thing that they must be cannibals because look at them. They look like, wild and savage and all that. So, sorry, I just had to jump in there.
So many places made me angry. So there's this place where, he talks about all the donkeys were dead. And the lesser animals or something, and nobody knew about the lesser animals, where he speaks about the Europeans actually. He says that, donkeys are better because they are more of a working people at least. So these people were not doing anything. And so they are lesser animals or something like that. And they are primitive. Donkeys. So donkeys are primitive. So they are much better or whatever. And then the same kind of sentence is again, mirrored when he speaks about them, Africans also. So you just like, in his way, he's trying to say that I didn't care about Europeans. They were lesser animals for me, but Africans are better animals or whatever. But even then, that's also a dehumanizing. They're animals. Exactly.
They're animals. So it's like, making them an object of pity, right? Like these poor people who, when you take away their agency, I always think of that Chimamanda Adichie's that she has this TED talk where she talks about the power of story, right? Like how
Yeah,
you
yeah.
tell a narrative and how you represent. If somebody else is telling your story, like Conrad is telling the story of these people in the Congo without actually knowing anything about them or bothering to know anything about them. So he has that power to dehumanize them in the eyes of everyone that reads that
Oh,
work.
yeah,
Um, but he yeah, so if they tell their own, obviously there's nuances, there's culture, there's all different kinds of things that are all legitimate and they have good people and bad people. They're not just like a faceless mass of victims, right? Like
exactly.
that
And I
yeah.
found it very there are many places where it's dehumanizing, many places where he definitely writes with an air of superiority, and
Yeah.
that definitely does come across, in my opinion at least. And
Yeah.
also another interesting thing, now that you mentioned the power of story, and why. So there's another interesting article which is there online. If you just search for it, you would find it.
Hmm.
The name of the article is Who Can Tell My Story?
Mm.
Okay, so that's a very, very interesting one. It's by a Black author who talks about, who can actually tell her story, who has the right to tell her story. And she
Yeah.
she basically, talks about a lot of these little nuances which happens when she visits her grandparents, which is very
Hmm.
different how it would be when she is with her parents, or very different from how it would be when she hangs out with her friends, or when
Yeah.
she is with the whites. So she says the
Yeah.
whites can never be able to write that as what
Yeah.
I would behave, because I'm going to behave very differently to you. So you can't depict a scene where I'm sitting with my grandmother and talking, because
Yeah.
that's something you will never be a privy to,
That's an
So
interesting. Yeah, I'll look that up.
yeah.
It's also kind of a theme in Yellowface. If you've read Yellowface,
No.
Yellowface is very much um about somebody who, I mean, she steals a friend's novel. She's a white woman who's sort of, and this is going off topic, so I'll try and keep it brief. But they're both writers, and this other girl is Asian American, very successful. This literary darling has, and she's got that diversity card, right? So which is very hot. Which people want to know about Asian culture or different cultures, right? Nobody really is looking for the stories of a cisgender white woman. And so she inadvertently steals this girl's manuscript and then poses as Asian or poses as, like she's representing. So that gets into that whole conversation of, again, like she hasn't actually written the story. What she's done is she's edited it and she's made it more white friendly. So
Mm.
there's a lot of sort of look at, because she's taken out the sort of highlighting of racism, or she's sort of tapered it down so it's more comfortable for her. So there's a whole sort of examination of how somebody who's got that sort of sympathy card, or like that has that sort of um defensiveness, that I don't want to be part of this, this is too uncomfortable for me to read about white people as a white person being racist.
Correct.
Um, so I want to accept something that sort of lets me off the hook.
Mm.
So if that makes sense. So it kind of all connects.
Correct.
So
True, true,
yeah.
true. Very true. So we had a very another interesting discussion. You had been in the you've if you had gone through the newsletter I had sent about Achibe's speech about this in the current newsletter. So after that there were a few responses, and so there was one very interesting discussion. So one of my friend who had written that probably he didn't write it because he knew he couldn't write it. He had no idea what they think,
Yeah.
what they feel. So he can't
Yeah.
write that at all. So, but not giving a voice to them is only one part of the, problem with the
Problem.
book. But I think
Yeah.
the bigger problem is how they are treated in even the whatever part that he's written.
Yeah.
I think,
They're sort of part of the scenery, and
correct.
not I mean, even the sort of queen or whoever is sort of prancing around at the end as they're driving off, they're sailing off, like not driving off, but sailing off. Like he never explains that. Like
Mm,
what was happening there?
mm,
I still don't understand what he was. I mean, you kind of get a sense that this is somebody who was involved with Kurtz, so
Yeah,
you know, but
correct.
it really isn't really he's not sort of delved deeper
Correct.
into that. So yeah. Sorry, I just
It's very
it
interesting.
is
Yeah, it's very interesting. But a little bit more also I had about this. Let me
sure,
share
sure,
my screen.
sure.
And see. So, so we just saw all this, and so the argument keeps continuing. So the novelist Carrie Phillips stated in 2003 that Achebe is right, and that to the African reader, the price of Conrad's eloquent denunciation of colonialism is the recycling of racist notions of the dark continent and her people. Those of us who are not from Africa may be prepared to pay this price, but this price is far too high for Achebe. And again, so the to and fro keeps going on. So the British academic Cedric Watts criticizes the insinuation in Achibe's critic, the premise that only Black people may accurately analyze and assess the novella, as well as mentioning that Achibe's critic falls into self-contradictory arguments regarding Conrad's writing style, both praising and denouncing it at times. So again, this is another very interesting. So is it that only a novel which is written about such an important issue, is it that only an African person can accurately analyze and assess it, and is another person allowed to critique it too? That's a very interesting part of the discussion too. So another interesting thing about this was, since we had just finished reading Viet Thanh Nguyen's The Sympathizer last month. So what was very interesting to see was that this book played a major part on Viet Thanh Nguyen's writing of The Sympathizers too. So he talks about an incident where, as a immigrant in America, he goes to watch a movie which is based on this book, which is that Apocalypse Now. So this movie where they show the Vietnamese, people being hurt, Americans saving them, and it's the typical American war movie. And when he watched the movie, he felt that the movie, while being very critically acclaimed, it centered primarily on American soldiers' experiences and largely ignored the Vietnamese perspective, reducing them to just background characters. And mostly they were just victims. Whole villages were burned, hundreds of Vietnamese die, and these are the things which are shown. So this portrayal, which he watched as a child, was what made him feel that he needs to explore the other side of the story in his own work. Notably, that is what led to the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Sympathizer. So the discussion, we had a very nice and long, lengthy, wonderful discussion on the book, which is there on YouTube. So in case you all had missed the session last month, you can please watch it. So Nguyen had spoken about how Conrad's novella shaped his understanding of the power dynamics between colonizers and colonized. He admired Heart of Darkness for its stylistic and narrative complexity, but recognized its flaws, especially in how it marginalizes non-European voices. So in The Sympathizer, Nguyen subverts the colonial narratives present in Heart of Darkness by focusing on the narrator, who is both a victim and a participant in the colonial system. So it's a very interesting read too. And like Conrad, Nguyen also explores the moral ambiguities and psychological effects of violence and war. But the difference is that he gives voice to the characters who would have been otherwise silenced when it comes to the traditional Western narratives. So his critical engagement with Conrad's work demonstrates a broader effort to reclaim and reshape stories about colonized and marginalized people. So did Conrad fail? Conrad's depiction of the African characters as voiceless, primitive, and dehumanized has been a point of contention in the recent decades. So should this book be viewed as a critique of colonialism or as a product of the racist attitudes of its time? So why did Conrad not give no voice to the oppressed? So now, at least for the last question, I think one of the reasons is because I think he had no idea about the voice of the oppressed. And I don't think he could have done any justice to it even by trying to write about it. But apart from that, what does it, what are your thoughts about the same? Please, feel free to unmute and share. Shamal Raoji or Meenal. Meenal, have you read this book before? Did you read it for the book club?
I read it years ago.
Okay.
And I just didn't have time to catch up because so much is happening at school. There are too many major events.
Okay,
So I
yeah.
didn't read that, yeah.
Now is
Years
the
back,
time, for all the
yes,
school events.
yes. So there's a lot happening at school.
Yeah.
So I thought I'll join today and,
Do you
read
remember your
time.
experiences of reading the book?
It's very disturbing, that sort of all that happened. But I can't remember anything specific as such.
Okay. Yes, Shamal Raoji, would you like to add something?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. For me, the book was a masterpiece.
Mm.
It is a very small book, 120, around 130 pages. I thought I will be able to complete it and give it a go. But it's not like that actually. Though small, actually, the book is very immense. That's what I found. And the tale is also bewildering. And one has to read again and again to understand what actually author has concealed, not divulged, not spoken about. From his book, I find actually more than what he speaks. Actually, he keeps much to the silence is also there. That is to be understood. Maybe if I can go in for reading some more of his books, I'll be able to understand. This is the only book or the first book that I have read of James Conrad. And then when I searched for him, because the book is small and other things, what are the things that actually the book has given rise to issues? And I found the internet, and there is a huge, what I call, quantity of papers, books, or observations, criticism, this side, that side, imperialism. So my initial observation that he was concealing something which I could not get it in the first read was confirmed. The book has more than what it is showing visibly. That is my first feeling. So when I found actually, and your email also added a trigger to it. Particularly when he spoke of imperialism, and then actually that Belgian crisis, other things also, and the river Congo and the richness of Congo. The book had a lot of what I call things that I could not get them at initial stage. That's what I found. And the way it ended the criticism from other writers, Chinua Achebe or something like that, that also is worth examining. What I found was it is hazy whether it's pro-imperialism or anti-imperialism. That is not clear because he spoke on both sides. First, when he actually, let us put, he is anti-imperialistic interpretations when he has portrayed that Belgian colonizers' brutality, greed, and hypocrisy in the opening chapter through the eyes of Marlowe. So we will take him as a critical of that imperialism. Similarly, he has elaborately describes the dehumanization of colonial people, where Marlowe witnesses the treatment meted out to enslaved Africans. Similarly, when actually he goes in for corruption, moral decay of colonialism, symbolized through Kud's descent into madness. That means what effect it has got on others who work for imperialists. This Kud's, he becomes mad. And then let us go in for pro-imperialist interpretations. And Conrad displays his colonial attitude towards Africans by depicting them as the primitive, as you said already in a PowerPoint, savage and irrational. And further, the book is centers on European characters and he romanticizes them. Rather, colonialism's adventurous aspects get romanticized in his book. And then African characters remain silenced or marginalized. We already said it. For example, one more thing I will say. Kruj has an African mistress. At the end, you will find,
Yeah, yeah.
and also an European woman in his life.
Mm.
And Conrad holds different attitudes for these two women. For example, when he bestows human expression to the one and withholds it from the another, rather, he objectifies and silences her, exemplifying the colonial's gendered violence. When he speaks of that African women, no word, nothing, and something, what you call, not understandable. But when he comes to this European lady, actually, he is more expressive.
Correct.
For example, actually, at the end of the story, Conrad also gives a page quoted unexpectedly on an African woman, and he says she was savage and super, wild-eyed and magnificent. She stood looking at us without a stir, and like the wilderness itself, with an air of brooding over an inscrutable purpose. And as far as this European lady is concerned, see the exact way he puts her. She came forward, all in black with pale head, floating toward me in the dusk. She was in mourning. She took both my hands in hers and murmured, I had heard you were coming. She had mature capacity for fidelity, for belief, for suffering. Look at the comparison between these two women. That is, I
Yeah,
find actually is
correct.
partial to European lady. He was not treating them properly. And you said actually this stance, not only people were pro, that means some notable scholars were there. They were supported, argued for Conrad's pro-imperialistic stance. And you have already taken the name of Chinua Achebe. And there are two more writers I found, Edward Said and Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak.
Okay.
And then who argued against Conrad's pro-imperialist stance were Ian Watt, Frederick R. Curd, and Cedric Watt. These are the people who said no, they were against Conrad. In other words, his book is as a divided. Two extreme opinions are there, pro and anti-imperialism, he stand. But all said and done, I will say finally, when these charges have come, he has written in a letter to Roger Casement in December 21st, 1903. He says, it is important, I'm not a politician. I'm an artist, a painter of pictures with words. My concern is with the human condition, not with political systems. I have no politics. So, from his point of view, he is neither this nor that. He says, I'm only a man of letters. So, ultimately, we have to look at him as a man of letters. And if that be the case, there are brilliant paragraphs in the book, actually. As you just said, they are not sentences, they are beautiful paragraphs. You can enjoy it if you go in for a reread, actually. How much depth he has added in the language, words he has employed to communicate. I have quoted a few more, but they were too large, actually. I thought one or two quotations, but they came to paragraphs. I was so impressed, actually. Those, I really enjoyed them.
Yes, yes.
I really enjoyed them, actually.
Yeah.
That is what I find.
For me, what like just to add to what you had said, Shamal Raoji, one more
Please.
point which just came to my mind was I felt that it was more than a criticism of imperialism. It felt like a criticism of the methods being used by the imperialists. That's it. It didn't
To
feel
extract
like
their
a,
interest.
yeah. So
Exactly.
yeah. So he's just criticizing that they came, they were supposed to civilize the population, which itself is again very racist attitude, I think, the thought itself. But they're supposed to civilize the population. Instead, they are only exploiting. And even in that exploitation, there's a lot of wastage of effort, wastage of resources, and not a very efficient way of exploitation. Oh, that's what I should say, the right way
Very
to
nice.
put it.
Coming back to home.
Hmm.
So we had to take, once upon a time, we were also a colony of a country.
Hmm.
And we also heard about our thorough reparations speech, actually, how much
Correct.
they have exploited us. Maybe on the other side, they may say we have given educational institutions. On the other side, they may say we have given railway. But look at the loot they have incurred. So for all purposes, imperialism only loots.
Correct.
The colonizer loots the colonized. That is what we have to accept. Whatever may be his point of view. Because it is our experience. All throughout the world it happened. If not this country A, it will be country B who will be exploiting the other C. That is the point. And there are certain things actually he has left loose. That means much of the things, sentences, he has left to the reader's mind to visualize or to what I call draw his own conclusions.
Mm.
For example, there is a title, the just before dying or what he says, the horror. Remember?
Yeah.
What actually is the meaning of that? He cries out twice. And the cry was not more than a breath. He says, the horror, page 103 actually. What does it mean? Believe me, I had to take the help of someone else. What actually it means?
I have one
Someone,
slide on it.
then I will withhold myself here. And if you, whatever you already done, I would like to supplement if anything is missing.
Yes,
Thank you very
please
much.
do.
That is
Please
good.
do. Yeah.
That I shall do it actually. That was a
Yes.
very good expression. It caught hold of my attention actually. And the language, you must have taken a lot of quotations and other things. But
Yeah, I have. Yeah, please do.
when I will do it when that PowerPoint
Okay.
slide
Sure,
comes.
sure, sure.
I think I will stop here, whatever I had to say. And the book. And I have I found Lord Jim in your bookshelf.
Oh, okay.
Not now, in the earlier.
Oh,
Now it is not
earlier.
visible. You are given
Okay.
some. I thought Madam has read 2 books. I am always struggling with one book. I thought myself. Because
No,
this
no,
is only
no.
first book. I could not come out still. I still feel like
No,
reading it.
actually I found it difficult to read. I thought we chose a novella because we wanted to read it fast, and then I felt this
Exactly.
is like so difficult to read. It took so much time, and as you had mentioned, I had to go back and reread passages because suddenly I was lost. Where is it happening? Because he's narrating the tale to somebody else of an
Ah,
incident which he's again narrating about.
a
So the whole,
story within a story.
yeah, story within a
Novel
story.
within a novel. And it is
Yeah.
not non-linear. That is another problem. Language is tough. And it is speaking of something, a policy. So many things are involved. The book is small, but the
Hmm.
issues that he handles, the expression is, but it's enormous. That's what I feel.
Correct.
And it has a lot of criticism, more
Yeah.
than praise. More than praise. And the criticism also, if you read criticism on its own, you will feel you will go with Achebe. You will not. Yes, they are right, actually.
Yeah,
And
they are.
was not there a wrong treatment as far as two women in the novel are concerned by the author? They are not treated at all.
Correct.
They were treated very
But
differently.
but one more thing I think is that, sometimes over a period of time, our views of certain things change. And, we develop as a person and as a society also, I think. So
Exactly.
probably,
That's
sometimes I think classics, when we look at it from today's lens, then they kind of, is it right? Is it fair also is something we don't know. For what he is written at that time, this was scandalous that he's criticized them so much about,
exactly. That is the
so,
conclusion I also felt. It is
mm,
contextual.
yeah,
You have to
exactly.
look from that point of view at that time. You
Hmm.
can't connect it with today and then say this is right, this is wrong.
Correct,
In that
correct.
way, actually, the other two writers who are criticized can be wrong. Otherwise, it could not have been a classic that long. And
Mm.
it is read in high school, so much criticism, so many things and other things have come.
Correct, correct.
But language is top class.
Yes, definitely. Very,
Yeah.
very interesting,
Uh,
usage of
I try to put
sentences.
uh,
It
it is
was,
not enough if
yeah,
you just quote a sentence. The sentence has the thrust and the weight and the depth only when you bring it in a paragraph. That is what
paragraph.
I felt.
Correct, correct.
I took more time. Thank you, ma'am.
No, no. Thank you.
Thank you very
Uh,
much.
Percy, would you like to add something?
Yeah, hi. Just a minute. Let me. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Percy. Would you like to
Hi.
add
Long
something?
time.
Have you read it?
Yeah, of course. In fact, I have read Heart of Darkness twice. The
Okay.
first time, like
Shamaraji and some of the other people said, I had a very ambiguous response. So it is a very difficult book to read, right? The first time, like,
Yeah.
what is this guy's writing style, right? Because it's walls and walls of text. And it's not at all like other writers, of that time period. And I came away from that, and that first reading took me a long time, right? It's like a 103-page book, 105 pages, something like that. And I think it took me over a week. And I was like, I can even not sure what he's trying to say. Like, is this a deeply imperialist? Is this a borderline racist book, or what is it? Because the ending kind of goes in a different direction.
Correct.
The thing is, I read the book again after a gap of maybe a year, and I finished it in a day and a half. And my perceptions were completely different. It came across to me at the time as a deeply powerful tirade against whatever Europe was doing in Africa. And I was myself surprised how could a second read produce that reaction when the first had not. Usually I am, able to get a decent amount of my first reads, but this was something else. I and I don't want to get too deeply into that imperialist pro anti debate. I did not come away with the feeling that he was in any way advocating imperialism. I think eventually we have to understand Conrad was from Poland, not which was not at all into the whole imperialist colonizing project compared to the
Belgium and
England, Belgium, France, Spain, all those. So to that extent, I don't think he was consciously pro-imperialism. It's another matter whether there was a undercurrent or a subconscious level of imperialism happening, because let us not forget that India's some of our most revered freedom fighters were a part of the home rule movement, right? They did not imagine a world where the emperor or the empress was not the empress of India as well. So we have to consider that. But and all this came up later. I mean, when I read the book, I was like, this guy is really, and he's writing for a European audience, right? I don't know if he's writing in English for an English reading audience. Is that he's laying bare to them things that they may never have thought about in terms of where their daily goods come from, right? Where is your all those exploited loot coming from? So to that extent, I think it is a very powerful statement against racism, against, yeah, is it dehumanizing? I mean, again, to the extent that he doesn't really write anything from the perspective of the oppressed, right? Yes. But I am always a bit wary of judging books for what they are not, rather than on what they are. And I think you'll find this pretty consistently whenever I think about any books. Judging it for what it is, I think it is a powerful statement against exploitation and against colonization, and obviously brings out the horrors of Belgian occupation in a way that I think and hope would have been widely understood by a section of the reading audience.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Very, very interesting how two readings of the book could bring two different views, right?
I would recommend anyone, I mean, all of you who have read it for the first time this week or who have not read it in a while, to give it another read after a gap.
Okay.
It should make a difference, because our friend Harish, Ravi Kumar, similar experience.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. We'll try it. Hi, Zen or Meenal, would you like to add something? Or shall I go on with the discussion?
I think you can go on.
Okay. Zen, do you want to add something or do you want me to proceed?
I just want to express my gratitude that I am so happy and thrilled to hear so many different perspectives. Yes, when I read it in college, the common narrative is what this book is not, and uh, side by side, when we compare uh, Dr. Said's Orientalism, that whole argument that how the European people portrayed the East in a certain light and how that is condemned, that whole discourse. In that light, yes, this book has always been discussed in academic circles, but I'm more intrigued to see, like, with this discussion, I've come to realize that maybe we should, at least I would start seeing this book for what it is, which is probably uh, probably a picture in that time zone. Like, it's just a portrayal of the consciousness of that. And
Correct.
also, when I was hearing the arguments, I was thinking of the age-old argument, art for art's sake and art for life's sake. Maybe this book is not about preaching the moral values of what is right and what is wrong. Maybe it's just a description of how a Polish person views colonization, not as a colonizer, but definitely as a part of it.
Mm.
And yes, there would be arguments like who should, like, I like the argument when there was this argument that who is supposed to be, who is allowed to comment on a topic like this.
Correct.
I had come across a slightly similar discourse where an African person had once said that braids are everything African and nobody else should have a comment on it. And then on that, people were saying, no, other cultures have had culture of braiding as well.
Correct.
So similarly, when it comes to books like these, there is a synergy when it comes to the colonized countries, and they also want to comment on it. But then obviously there is a hierarchy that is to be observed. That yes, firstly, the people of the land are supposed to set the narrative right, and then obviously others are. I think they should be allowed to comment on the synergy that they feel because
Mhm.
of the common culture of colonization. But yeah,
Mhm.
I would definitely like to give this book another read and to see this book just as it is, like a picture in history, and to analyze it that way. Thank
Great, great. Okay, so let me just share my screen again. So actually, the main theme that Conrad wanted to portray was the hollowness of civilization. So he wanted to show that European civilization, though they call themselves as great and much accomplished and everything, he felt it was just hopelessly and blindly corrupt. So the novella depicts an European society as hollow to the core. He describes the white men, whenever Marlowe describes the white men he meets in Africa, right from the general manager to courts, he calls them as empty. And he refers to the unnamed European city as the sepulchral city. A sepulchre is a hollow tomb. So that's what he calls the entire city. He never names the city at all in the entire book. So, throughout the novella, Marlowe argues that what Europeans call civilization is very superficial. It's only a mask which is created by fear of the law and public shame, but it hides a very dark secret. And just as a beautiful white sepulchre hides the decaying dead inside. And once, he feels that where the people from this civilization, once they enter the African jungle, where there is utter solitude without a policeman, the civilized man is plunged into a world without any superficial restrictions. So the mad desire for power comes to dominate him. Inner strength could allow a man to push off the temptation to dominate. But civilization actually saps this inner strength by making men think it's unnecessary, you know. And I think this was what more than whether pro or against civilization, imperialism. This is something I think what he wanted to convey, that the civilized man believes he is civilized through and through. So when a man like Kurtz suddenly finds himself in the solitude of the jungle and he hears the whisperings of his dark impulses, he is unable to combat them and he becomes a monster. So he wants to say that there's a heart of darkness in even among the civilized or even in civilization. And actually, on the other hand, he feels that the African people are more primitive, simple, and they're not bound by these rules. So whatever goodness is in them is the goodness which is there naturally. So unlike the rules and policing which is done here. Another theme is black versus white. So generally, in common parlance, black is bad and white is good. So in Heart of Darkness, he just tries to twist this idea of, this conventional idea of white as good and dark as evil. So here, basically, evil and good don't really apply because everyone in the novella is somehow complicit in the atrocities which is taking place in Africa. So rather, whiteness, which he here, symbolizes using the white fog which surrounds the steamship, the whiteness here symbolizes the blindness. So the dark is symbolized by the huge African jungle associated with the unknowable and the primitive heart of all men. And that whole theme plays out in everywhere, wherever he talks about the dark, unknown, and everything. And wherever he says the white fog enveloped us. And so this was my interpretation of those famous last words of Kurtz. So where he says the horror and the horror. So when he says so Kurtz basically, he goes to seek wealth and power in the African jungle, but then he becomes consumed with greed, madness, and he completely loses his humanity. So when he says the horror, the last moments just before he's dying, he basically says, he sees from maybe the horror of colonialism, where he sees the brutal reality of European imperialism and which he had previously, embraced. He's seeing the exploitation, the dehumanization of the African people, probably one kind of interpretation. Or maybe he sees the horror of human nature. He sees the darkest part of his own soul. He recognizes that he has such a capacity for evil resides within himself, that he has fallen to such levels. And also at this time, he probably thinks about the horror of death and the futility of everything that he's done. So he may be grappling with the meaninglessness of life and the futility of his achievements and ambitions, seeing how his pursuit of power has led to a moral and spiritual ruin. So probably the words, in my opinion, was a mixture of existential dread, moral emptiness, despair, and everything together. Did you want to add something, Shamal Raoji?
I find you have included a lot of what I was feeling
Okay.
to speak about. Just a second. Let me go to it. But look at the technique of the expression. Why that ambiguity has been allowed by Conrad. Why he did not pinpoint and say this is the reason why actually this expression has come. Is the technique on the part of the Conrad or a confusion on his part which you could not pinpoint and say, or he has allowed a freedom to the reader to draw his own conclusion basing on his own reading? Because this is the conclusion you drew. Some other reader can draw another conclusion.
Correct.
That possibility is there. The ambiguity of language, whenever it is there, it is always possible to draw two different conclusions, isn't it, ma'am? Actually,
very true, very, very true. So
look at the other side. Maybe actually the writer wanted to say he wanted to increase the breadth of interpretability. That is also one point. That means not only the writer is creative, even the readers are forced to become creative in their own thinking when they read the book parallel to what the writer has put forth.
Correct.
That is also one of the reasons. And as you said, maybe as far as Coogee is concerned, It could be a moral despair or emotional collapse because he has seen the atrocities in the jungle, or he has seen and felt actually the imperialism's capacity for cruelty, savagery, or darkness, as you just said.
Correct.
Or it is an existent despair on the part of Kuch because he has confronted the abyss of human existence, acknowledging the meaninglessness and absurdity of life. It could be anything. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
And if you connect it with some other writings of the writer, Conrad, you may draw a different conclusion. We cannot limit only to this. That means a wider interpretability has been given by the writer to the reader. That's what I felt, madam.
Correct.
Thank
Very
you.
true. Yeah. Which is why probably it's a very popular book among literature students, maybe.
That is what initially I said. The book is more, it has got unsaid than what is said.
Yeah, correct, correct.
Every page you have to underline. Anyway, that is a different thing. There are
True,
so many
true.
things in it, actually.
True.
Ma'am, I wanted to add one thing.
Yeah, sure.
In There's one poem by John Keats. It's called Ode to the Grecian Urn. In that, there is a line that says, "Heard melodies are
Yes,
sweet,
yes.
but those unheard are sweeter." So I was reminded of that because my interpretation of the horror is that to everyone, this is my personal belief that to each person, heaven, hell, and purgatory may look different. Right. And
Okay.
when this person is saying horror, horror, we don't know what this person is seeing or experiencing. And our imagination goes wild, and everybody would interpret it differently. Somebody would say he's seeing the devil, somebody would say, like Indians would say, Hindus would say he's seeing probably Yamraj, somebody would say he's seeing Lucifer, hell, purgatory. And it's just a wild imagination. And it also ties with the idea of death being such an unknown and scary place that when it's approaching, you have no idea. Your imagination goes wild. You don't know where you will end up with, but you know that this is the end, and beyond that, you're conscious. Even if you experience something, you would not be able to convey it to other people. So it remains one of the biggest mysteries. So it adds to that mystery, and that the way he has captured this fear and approaching death in those words, I find it really beautiful.
That's very interesting, Zen. We are like, from whatever I had mentioned, connects the horror to what happened in the past. But it could be that he's peeping into the future of what is there awaiting for him now in death. And that could be what makes him say the words. I never thought of it that way. Great. Thanks for adding that. I have some quotes from the book here. So, in case any of you have some quotes too, you can please add it to the comments, or, you can also please read it out too. It'll be great. So, hunters for gold or pursuers of fame, they all had gone out on that stream, bearing the sword and often the torch, messengers of the might within the land, bearers of a spark from the sacred fire. What greatness had not floated on the ebb of that river into the mystery of an unknown earth? The dreams of men, the seed of common wealth, the germs of empires. I just took out this quote for the way he has formed the sentence and how the entire flow of it. Yeah. We live as we dream, alone. While the dream disappears, the life continues painfully. It was written I should be loyal to the nightmare of my choice. I don't like work, no man does, but I like what is in the work, the chance to find yourself, your own reality for yourself, not for others. What no other man can ever know. They can only see the mere show and never can tell what it really means.
The real, just let us go back to the previous slide.
Yes.
The real expression there is the chance to find yourself in whole of the quote.
The chance to find
That
yourself.
is the jewel. That is the jewel, actually. I also quoted it. The chance, work means the chance to find yourself. That is why you work. It's a good quote.
Very good quote. Yeah. They were conquerors, and for that you want only brute force, nothing to boast of when you have it, since your strength is just an accident arising from the weakness of others. I thought this was also very beautiful. Your strength
Good
is
point.
just an accident arising from the weakness of others. But his soul was mad. Being alone in the wilderness, it had looked within itself, and by heavens, I tell you, it had gone mad. We live in the flicker. May it last as long as the old earth keeps rolling. But darkness was here yesterday. And this stillness of life did not the least resemble a peace. This also was such a beautifully framed sentence, I felt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have so many sentences in the book like that.
Yeah.
And if you can precede it with one more sentence as in the paragraph, succeed it, another, the whole total weight comes, total beauty comes.
Correct.
Please.
I went a little farther, then still a little farther, till I had gone so far that I don't know how I'll ever get back. This felt like he's talking about completely something else. It can, it reminded me of so many.
Beginning. Marlowe's quote. Marlowe says.
Yeah. Droll thing life is. That mysterious arrangement of merciless logic for a futile purpose. The most you can hope from it is some knowledge of yourself that comes too late, a crop of unextinguishable regrets. The start of the sentence itself, the droll thing life is.
Right.
Yeah. Did he live his life again in every detail of desire, temptation, and surrender during that supreme moment of complete knowledge? He cried in a whisper at some image, at some vision. He cried out twice, a cry that was no more than a breath. The horror.
Yes, the horror, exactly.
Yeah. So, yes.
I got one quote, one or two quotes. I'll put them there kindly.
Sure.
Maybe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a second.
I hope you enjoyed Mira and Zen. You've joined us for the first time.
I absolutely loved it, ma'am. I'm looking forward to more and more discussions. I'm like kind of angry at myself that I did not find you before. Like you're saying you're doing it for a couple of years, and I'm like, why, how did I not find you? But I'm glad that I have found you now. And I hope that this continues for the upcoming years so that I can have my full of these kinds of discussions. I loved it, and I'm looking forward to more discussions.
Great. So glad to have you, Zen.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Likewise. Although this book made me so angry, maybe a second reading is what is required.
Possibly.
I don't know. And I got really confused, and maybe this is just me. So I have actually, in the edition I got on Amazon, the Congo Diary, which are excerpts from his diary, which I couldn't understand that they weren't connected. Yes.
Same one.
So that is his diary, which I didn't get for the longest time. I was like, what is happening? Because it ends, and then there's this completely random laundry list of like, I went here. So I think that would have been really interesting if they put the illustrations in, because then it just shows illustration of without sort of showing the picture.
Correct.
So I got really confused with that for some time, but I really enjoyed the discussion, the perspectives. It's nice to hear other perspectives and raise these questions. And I definitely agree with. I mean, it's a beautifully written book. The language, I actually fell in love with the language, but then I got so angry that I forgot about the language. So maybe after some time I'll read it again and not be so angry.
The same thing happened with me, Mira. So even I saw the Congo Diary and I wondered what happened. But then when I was,
what is this?
What's this? I couldn't really connect with it at all. Then I had, when I was preparing for the presentation, I realized the entire book was written using
Uh-huh.
that diary, so which
That
he had
diary, yeah.
maintained at that point of time.
But the diary itself is not very interesting. So
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
I think I sort of skimmed it, but I didn't really,
Yeah,
I
same,
didn't
same.
really read it. But yeah, the book, the story itself is fascinating, and I
Yeah.
think it's always really nice to hear different perspectives on something. So you get,
True,
so
very
I'm
true.
happy. I've been missing having a book club, but time doesn't always permit. So it's nice to connect with fellow
join
readers.
in. Do join in whenever you can.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think Shamal Rao ji had shared a few
Oh,
quotes.
because I put it openly.
Yeah.
One for the language, first one, and second for the
Yeah.
quote.
Hmm.
One is for the language.
Okay. So one ship is very much like another, and the sea is always the same. In the immutability of their surroundings, the foreign shores, the foreign faces, the changing immensity of life glide past, veiled not by a sense of mystery, but by a slightly disdainful ignorance. For there is nothing mysterious to a seaman, unless it be the sea itself, which is the mistress of his existence and as inscrutable as destiny.
Destiny.
Yeah, very beautifully written. Yeah.
The relationship between a seaman and sea, actually. And he drew the mistress and the destiny, two things he linked.
Yeah. Okay. The second one is no, it is impossible. It is impossible to convey the life sensation of any given epoch of one's existence, that which makes its truth, its meaning, its subtle and penetrating essence. It is impossible. We live as we dream alone.
Alone.
Yeah.
That means our feelings cannot be communicated in its real depth. And that's what I understood. Maybe it has got something else.
Mm. As always, he's very ambiguous.
That is the problem with his writing.
Yeah.
His sentences are open to multiple interpretations.
Yeah.
That is what my final. Anytime you read, maybe morning, night, after 1 week, after 1 month, or something, you have separate meaning. Maybe that was not an initial reading. I missed it.
Yeah.
That is what I did. And beauty is last that there is a diary you have found out, Redmond, the Congo diary.
Yeah.
Opening sentences are okay, but why is it progresses, they become disjointed. 5, 6 pages, madam. They
Correct.
don't make sense. That means, do they reflect, isn't it? Do they reflect as a culture actually gradual descent into madness, losing mind, whatever?
So that's, I think, what was so difficult about it is that his sentences in the novella are so beautiful, and then you have this started at 5:40. The route
Ah,
is at first hilly, right? Like it goes very,
yes,
it's
yes.
very like point to point, and there's no pictures. I think if they
And
put
to
the
the
pictures in,
exactly, exactly. To the
would have
point,
been much
expression.
better.
It is a
Yeah.
sleepless night, mosquitoes. One word, one sentence. Uh,
Yeah, the
look
longest time
because
it
here
doesn't
I
match.
I
at
need to
one
just tell people, please burn my journals after me because probably
ah,
sounds very similar to this.
initially one sentence is one paragraph, and at the end one word is one sentence. Look at the contrast, look at the extremes. That's what I say.
Yeah,
The techniques
yeah.
he has employed. Right.
Really confused. I was
Yeah.
so confused because I was like, is this part? So what they should have done if they were going to, number one is they should have included the pictures. Because I
Yeah.
think that would have been really interesting to see how he sketched what he saw. Because this doesn't tell us anything. Then number two, they should have explained, like from,
Yeah, that's true.
Joseph Conrad's,
Yeah, journals or something,
journal or
Yeah,
something. Like
yeah.
the Congo diary could be anything. I mean, it could have been, I thought it was Kurtz's Congo diary. And I was like, okay, when does he get to the part where he gets with the African queen? Like I was just, so yeah, it's very confusing.
Yeah, it's very funny and very interesting. Uh, so, anybody else would like to add anything? So, by the way, Zen, we also read some modern classics sometimes, as we call it. So, prize winners and interesting fiction which comes up, but though which is not really a classic in real terms. So we're planning to choose one such for the next month. And as of now, based on the votes on email and from the Facebook group, it looks like The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese seems to be winning.
I have
Hopefully,
hit it on impulse, actually, that book.
but it's
There's a
lengthy.
background for it. Last
Oh,
time when I went to son in America, actually, there 2 years back, he has written it.
okay.
And I put a request actually in the library. And
Mhm.
when I put it, my number was serial 8. And I'm sure I'll not be able to read in America because I was leaving the place. Then I thought the book is much of a demand. Number one. Number two, Thomas Verghese, if you remember correctly, that writer, he has written forward to this when breath becomes air. Have you read that book, ma'am?
No, I haven't. You have recommended it before. I should.
That is a beautiful book. Actually. I can never forget it. Actually, this Verghese, he has written a forward to that book. Brilliant language there also, flowery and other things. And this because of these two reasons, when that and the third reason, it was at serial 1. Then immediately I said, okay, let us go for the book. Other things afterwards, I saw what are the options that you have given. Anyway, it is subject to vote and other things,
No, it
formalities.
seems to be winning. That's the one which has got the maximum votes. In fact, in even on email also, even
So
on the
what's the page count of it, ma'am?
it's about 600 to 700 pages, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
Okay. I recently read a 200-page book. It released this month, and it's about Goa in At Home in Two Worlds. It's about
Okay.
Maria Aurora Couto, and it was a 200-page book, ma'am, but it was so dense with
Ah.
personal experiences and historical and political aspects
Mhm.
about how Goa's identity shaped that I had gotten really exhausted. That's why I couldn't pick up Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Otherwise, I was really clear that I would pick it up. But that book,
Okay.
I would recommend it. It's
Sure.
a beautiful commentary on how Goa has evolved and how it is different from the other parts of India because of its Portuguese past and other things also. It's a beautiful book. I'm writing a review on it.
Oh, great.
But
Please do share it with
yes,
us. Share it with us
yes,
in the
ma'am.
group.
I'll definitely share it. It's a beautiful book. It was the last book of that author. She died two
Oh.
years before that book was published, but she has written three books on Goa, and she has been a native of Goa and an English teacher by profession, a
Wow.
professor that too. So
Okay.
it's a beautifully written book. Anyone who wants to know about the culture of Goa and it is written in a very scholarly way. So yes,
Great.
it's a thin book, but it is extremely dense when it comes to its thoughts and its words and all.
I missed hearing the title, madam. What is the title of the book?
At Home in Two Worlds. I'll
At
I'll
home.
type it in the chat.
Please do.
Yeah. And yeah, bye, Meera. See you soon. And I think The Covenant of Water, despite being more number of pages, probably is a much easier and simpler read, if I'm not wrong. So let's give it a try then. And I was thinking next Friday falls, the last Friday of October actually falls very close to Diwali. So we can have our discussion on November 8th, which gives us an extra week or two also to
To
complete the
read
book.
complete.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll have it on November 8th. And then there was one or two very interesting recent novellas which have come up. So maybe we can, last 3 weeks of November, probably we can pick up a novella and finish one more also then. Let's see.
What are the titles again?
The novella titles, I'll put it in the group itself on
Chart
the,
box, ma'am.
yeah,
No.
no, the Zen has added the name of the book, At Home in Two Worlds by Maria Aurora Couto. So, and she's put it in the chat box. Can you see
Yes,
it?
that she has put. That she has
Yeah.
put.
And the
No,
novellas, one was Rosarita, which I had put it in the poll this time, but it didn't win.
click.
Yeah,
He didn't
only
win the race.
only
He
one
didn't win
vote
the
it
race.
got. Yeah. There was one more also. I'll tell you the name. Just a minute. Yeah. So that was the other one, which is Not a River.
Not a river.
Not a
Okay.
River. So that one also I got some very good recommendation of it. So we can maybe pick one of them so that it's a lighter read, and after the heavier one we can have one more book. Hopefully we finish another 3 books before December.
Exactly. That is what we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for joining in.
So kind of you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shamal Ravji. Thank you,
Namaste.
Zen. Namaste.
Really
Thank
enjoyed
you,
it.
Meenal. Thank you,
I could
Meenal.
enjoyed
Thank you,
Namaste,
listening.
madam.
ma'am.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. See you. Bye.
See you. Bye.